There's a lot of bills right now coming up for vote. The legislators or aides, there's just so many things that they don't seem to be aware of that affect home care, and just trying to help them understand that we're still the best value in healthcare.
From your lens, what role does technology play in kind of operational scalability now?
I think the biggest piece is visibility. For so long, I think that DME, HME, CRT, we lagged so far behind current technology.
Where do you think independent providers still have an advantage over like the larger national organizations?
I can't speak to all of them, but I would say for us, it's the ability to control the decision making. In our 26 years in business, we have never had a down year. Our revenue has grown every single year we've been in business. Being independent has allowed us to look at those factors and to make decisions that aren't necessarily short-term based on financial performance, but understanding our industry and being able to, ride some of those waves or make a different decision that isn't necessarily strictly a P&L decision.
Okay, we are live on the #1 DME podcast, Claim to Fame, and today we have a special guest, Joel Gallion from Bellevue Healthcare. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Thanks, guys. Wayne and Alex, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Joel, before we jump into this, just, always like to take a second to introduce yourself to our listeners, kind of who you are and what you do, and we'll jump into it from there.
Sure. Well, I guess who I am is a little bit different than what I do, but we'll get both. Yeah, we'll start with the company, Bellevue Healthcare. We were founded in 2000, and so we're in August be coming up on 26 years in the industry. And I can tell you a little bit more about the background of that later, but just as we sit today, we have 23 locations across 3 states, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. I have been with the organization now 22 years, currently president and CEO. We were founded by Peter Norman, as I said, back in 2000, full service provider. And then outside of work, I've got 4 kids, pretty much all in the teenage years. Beautiful wife I've been married to for 20 plus years. And so definitely enjoy the Pacific Northwest, and it has been an interesting ride in the DME space for sure.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're plenty busy. Looking forward to getting into it. And speaking of busy, I know we originally rescheduled this because you were out at the AAHomecare Washington Legislative Conference. I think it's timely and really important. Just would love any feedback, what you saw on the Hill, anything that you think is important from an advocacy standpoint to share how that went.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was good to see so many providers out there. There were actually 2 different events going on, a little bit similar, but a little bit different as well. NCART had some stuff on the Hill last Tuesday, and then had a product expo in one of the house buildings on Wednesday. And then AAHomecare came in and did a legislative day on Thursday. So yeah, it was good to see the advocacy. There's a lot of bills right now coming up for vote. And so I think just basic awareness, and that was the biggest takeaway, is talking to a lot of, either the legislators or aides. There's just so many things that they don't seem to be aware of that affect home care, and just trying to help them understand that, we're still the best value in healthcare, and, being able to keep people home and out of the acute settings is vital to obviously controlling costs long term. So getting that message across. So it was great. Appreciate what NCART and AAHomecare did to put that together and advocate for our industry.
Yep. That's awesome. Yeah, we've had quite a few guests that are involved with the state associations, and I know you're heavily involved in PAIMS as well. So we're always grateful for the advocacy. So we appreciate that.
Yeah,
as you said, Joel, 22 years at Bellevue. You worked your way from sales and marketing to CEO, which is pretty rare these days. What kept you betting on this company and the industry for that long?
Yeah, my titles are a little misleading. I actually started as a delivery technician, but at the time, we all just took the title sales and marketing because that's really what we did, And so, and like I said, Peter Norman and Eric Mortensen founded Bellevue Healthcare in 2000. And initially, I know that their desire was to potentially serve adult family homes or do something in that nature, and they bootstrapped it. So they worked at UPS at night and worked on Bellevue Healthcare during the day. And Peter stumbled across a hospice here in the Seattle area, and no one really knew what hospice was at the time, at least from our perspective. And it was a very underserved market. And so They gave us a contract, and Peter and Eric did everything from, deliveries to cleaning equipment to customer service, billing, everything in between. And so that's a model that really they instilled in the organization. So when I came in a few years later, and a lot of our leadership team that's here now, we didn't know any different. And so we would kind of start at the ground level, do a little bit of everything, lick envelopes and fold HICFAs and answer phones, warehouse deliveries, anything in between, and just kind of all did everything. And we really did that for, probably a good 7 or 8 years until we really said, okay, we got to start specializing and bring on maybe some people that know a little bit more about some of the areas that we don't. But that was really the early mentality of Bellevue Healthcare, and it's really kind of continued through where we're at today. And we always like to say we want to be a place where people can reach their potential, whatever that is. And so we have a lot of people that come in and they're with us for a couple of years, or they come in and they're with us for 20 years. And, we just want to be a place where people can get their hands dirty, learn about a lot of things, leadership, healthcare in general, outreach, clinical avenues, and then, take that and do whatever's next for them. And so I'll give Peter and Eric a lot of credit for that, instilling that in the organization from day one.
It's awesome.
Super exciting stuff. Yeah, it's cool to create something where someone actually wants to be for a while. I mean, obviously that worked for you, and you obviously started at a different time, right? You kind of started closer to the beginning. Did you kind of ever envision Bellevue growing into one of the premier independent DME providers in the Northwest?
That's a really good question. I don't know that we ever thought about it in those terms. We early on, and I remember my first meeting with Peter. We went to the same college, a small liberal arts school down in Santa Barbara called Westmont. And so we knew of each other, but really didn't know each other. And the first time that we really sat down and talked about Bellevue Healthcare, I remember him telling me, we have a really great business model, and I think we have a lot of opportunity. We just don't have the right people yet to actualize that. And so that was kind of his pitch to me is, can we, get a group of people together that really have common values, common principles, common vision, and just see what happens. And so I don't know that we ever really had a plan of like where we wanted to be down the road. We're going to be going on 3 decades here pretty soon. And I don't know that any of us could have seen that, but I think it's been just a slow organic progression the whole time. And so we've been able to sort of see the next step as the next step has come up. But it's cool to look back, 20, 26 years later and look at our beginnings and see where everything's at today, for sure.
For sure, Joel. And you mentioned kind of you started as bootstrapped, wearing many hats, and then starting to kind of narrow, get a little bit tighter and more specialized. What are some of the biggest turning points in Bellevue's growth?
For us, it's always been about people. I think that's internally and, externally with our customers. We always tell, especially like hospice customers, we'll say we don't want someone that's going to be a customer for a year or two and then try to look on for something different or whatever. Like, we're looking to develop relationships that can last decades and that they can be sustainable. So I think that's true when you look at our customer base, and it's also true internally. I think that we really have tried to, again, develop something that people really want to grab onto, do work that's meaningful, and also have the upside of a career with it and kind of grow along with the organization.
Yeah, and Joel, you kind of mentioned about how people stay for a while or a few years or 5 years or 20 years. And I think all of it kind of ties back to the culture, right? It's making sure everyone kind of like not only just gets along, but you're building something that's bigger than the company itself. How do you sort of maintain a culture and the service quality as you're continuing to grow?
You have to remain true to what you are. I think is one of the big things. I think it's really easy to get distracted. I think it's both in life and in business. It's easy to see the shiny coin out there and say, "Oh, we could really go do that," or "Oh, there's a ton of growth opportunity there." And it's really why we haven't been an acquirer. We really, we've done really 2 small acquisitions over the 26 years we've been in business, but we've chosen to grow organically and organically open when we've grown and geographically and open new stores and locations. And I think that's really why we've been able to take that approach and stay grounded in that approach is that takes a while. It takes the investment, but it also takes time. And sometimes being patient is hard. But I think that patience and that commitment to the organic growth and then back to our people has allowed us to do that. So for example, complex rehab, you know, 15, 16 years ago, we didn't do complex rehab. And it was really because the internal people, we had people that were interested in it. They saw a need. And so they're like, hey, we're going to go get our ATP. And all we did is give them a platform to do that. And so now we have a robust, CRT department. And that really just stemmed from the fact that we had people internally that wanted to grow, saw it as a need area, and went out and did it.
And I think you guys use the term truly local. What does that actually mean operationally and culturally, kind of piggybacking off of some of the topics you just brought up?
We're Pacific Northwest through and through. So I think part of it is it allows us to stay grounded in that. Again, not to get distracted by, by other things. And I think part of it is we've really tried to embrace our local communities. We hire for the most part from within. When we have new store openings, it's usually because we have someone internally that is from that area or wants to go to that area. And so they take that Bellevue Healthcare culture with them. And so we like to stay rooted in that. And so that's really allowed us to be local. And, we really have in almost all of our markets, the people that work at Bellevue Healthcare generally started at Bellevue Healthcare somewhere else. And they've either made their way back home or they've made their way to a place they want to be. And that's what's really cool about it is when we can see those stories of, I had someone in my office a couple weeks ago and he said, hey, I'm interested in this area. So if we ever get there, like I'm your guy, I want to go there. And so it allows us to keep that local feel because we do have local ties and connections really everywhere we're at.
That's awesome.
Joel, what is a North Pacific Northwest culture? I don't even know. I'm just curious. Like, what does that mean?
Lots of coffee and Nirvana. I think
Okay, love that. Cool. How about it?
Seahawks, Mariners, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
The Pacific Northwest is different. There's obviously the outdoor aspect of it. We've really tried to embrace some of that. I mean, even if you look at some of our branding stuff,
Sure.
we really embrace, that like outdoor feel. I mean, we've been super fortunate that we have really cool Seattle-based companies out there that have done a great job, branding and marketing, what Seattle is or the Pacific Northwest in general. And again, we've really tried to stay true to that. I mean, even to the point of, every year we buy jackets, for our entire company. And we use Outdoor Research, which is a local Seattle brand, in that just to kind of stay true to that. We dipped our toes a little bit in California several years back and realized really quickly that we're not Californians. We're Pacific Northwesterners. So
that's cool. Yeah, no, I was just curious.
In your own lane. No,
Right.
I like that a lot. I did go to that first Starbucks in Seattle, so.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, I can't say that it is my favorite coffee, but it is definitely a Seattle brand. And, but there's a lot of them, Boeing, REI,
Yeah.
Nordstrom. There's a lot of cool Seattle companies out there. And so we try to stay true to that and obviously at a much different scale, but try to live up to the reputation.
Awesome.
Joel,
Go ahead,
going
Al.
back to kind of a little bit about like what Bellevue does. I know you mentioned how you later added CRT. You kind of operate across, a bunch of different areas, whether it's respiratory or retail, facility services. What areas right now do you think are sort of evolving the fastest?
Oh, wow. Evolving the fastest. It's funny. I feel like a lot of our industry, when you look at even like the software side, the technology side, I feel like we were sort of stuck in the same gear for like 15, 20 years. And then all of a sudden it feels like everything's changing every day. And so I don't know so much as the segments are changing because in a lot of ways the equipment hasn't changed a ton. I mean, there's been a slight advances in certain things. Obviously, the wheelchairs and some of the respiratory stuff is getting a little more sophisticated, but really at its core, those things haven't changed that much. I mean, we're still using the same wheelchairs and hospital beds that we used when I started. I think it's more everything else, the payer landscape, how people are getting equipment. I think when back when I started, and especially when Bellevue Healthcare was founded, retail in what we did wasn't really a thing. And today it's a big thing. And I think that I can see that piece evolving as well, where people are like, when I look at my grandpa's generation, it's like, hey, whatever Medicare wants to give me, I'm happy with. And then I look at like, my parents are down to myself and we're like, hey, no, I actually want something that's functionally going to work best for me. And I don't care if I have to pay for it.
Mm.
So I think there's been a mindset shift. So I think it's more the way that people are getting the equipment and the items more so than the actual items or the segment themselves.
Yeah, I feel like people like we spoke about this a few times before on podcasts, but I mean, just personally myself also, people want like that Amazon experience. People want just ease. No one wants to go through, 7 different, whether it's phone calls or different portals or things that are make it so much more difficult to get the thing that you actually need. I rather pay a little bit more and be able to click a button and get whatever it is that I'm looking for.
For sure. And you want choice, and we even had this internal debate recently. It's pretty much everything you buy now. It's like, well, hey, I can wait for economy shipping and get it for free. I can pay $10 and get it, 2 to 5 business days, or I can pay $25 and I can get it tomorrow. So I do feel like our choices are expanding. It's the whole airline, upgrade your seat thing, right? Like there's a reason why they're doing that. It's because people are willing to pay for it. And it just depends on the consumer and it gives them choice. And we're in an industry where there historically hasn't really been that much choice. But I do think that we're slowly moving that way where patients and users are becoming consumers and do want more choices in what they're getting, which is why I do think, ultimately, while we're still sort of stuck in the same reimbursement, landscape that we've always been, I do think those things will continue to change and adjust here and probably faster than, the last 20 years for sure.
Yeah, Joel, along the lines of, evolution, you mentioned we were kind of in this same space for 15 years. And from my point of view, the last 24 months have definitely accelerated from like a technology standpoint. From your lens, what role does technology play in kind of operational scalability now?
I think the biggest piece is visibility. You know, for so long, I think that, DME, HME, CRT, we lagged so far behind current technology. I can throw a rock from my office and hit Microsoft, and so we obviously, I have a lot of friends and family that, work in tech here in Seattle, and, looking at the sort of tools and things they had, and then you kind of circle it back to look at what I had, it was always like, this makes no sense, and so I do think that that's caught up here. I think that the visibility has been the biggest thing, because we're not stuck with the tools that are just built for, DME or HME. There's all these other pieces, and we've had it in fits and spurts, with Power BI and some of the other things that have been available. But I do think that now with AI and especially with the ability to really code and do UI real time by somebody who's not an engineer, we're able to build, like, if we want a dashboard that shows us whatever metric we want to see, I mean, we can build that almost instantly now. Whereas, gosh, even a few years ago, that was, you're extracting data, you're putting it into a third party,
Yep.
then, making, having to navigate that and build a dashboard there, where now it's almost instantaneous.
Absolutely.
Joel, I wanted to ask, obviously, there's different advantages depending on if you're an independent provider or a larger national organization. Where do you think independent providers still have an advantage over like the larger national organizations?
I can't speak to all of them, but I would say for us, it's the ability to control the decision making. We have the same ownership group, we've always had, and while we have been in our 26 years in business, we have never had a down year. Our revenue has grown every single year we've been in business. Now, margins, that's a different story. Sometimes we've had tighter margins than others, but being independent has allowed us to look at those factors and to make decisions that aren't necessarily short term based on financial performance, but understanding our industry and being able to, ride some of those waves or make a different decision that isn't necessarily strictly a P&L decision that allows us to actually be way more competitive long term. And I think honestly, where I've seen it show up the most is it's allowed us to say no to business that we knew wasn't sustainable or wasn't right for the organization. And again, going back to Peter, our founder, of not having the pressure to be like, well, we just have to take any revenue we can because we have to make our numbers look good, to be able to really analyze and say, does this business or does this partnership or relationship, does it make sense? And then when it doesn't, being able to say no and being able to turn away, $2.5 million worth of business, knowing that long term we're going to be better for it, even though in the short term, when we're answering to investors, there's probably a lot more pressure there to do some of those things. So that's where I've seen it show up the most for us.
Sure. And I think kind of common denominator throughout the course of Bellevue is I was actually just listening to a podcast about this recently, signal versus noise. And I really resonated, from my time here at Nico Health. People come to us all the time with great ideas, but they can also be distractions, right? Especially when you're the core software solution, a lot of opportunities can come your way to resell certain services or choosing one integration over another. So we've always taken the same approach of like, actually, Jalen Hurts said it, keep the main thing the main thing. And I always like that quote. But yeah, definitely resonate with that kind of staying in your lane, staying true to what you know, and not all business is good business. And, it kind of makes me think that's a great piece of advice. But what else kind of separates, a average operator from a great one when it comes to DME?
I think understanding your principles and convictions and just being willing to stick to it. It goes to what we just talked about. And in your example, it's, Nico, you guys come into an industry that has like long-term, entrenched, software. And so, yeah, you have to be the innovator and you have to, you have to do the new things and whatever, but it's easy, I think, to, like you said, Wayne, to say, you know, try to be everything to everybody. And it just doesn't work. And it just really doesn't work. And so I think that when you know ahead of time and can agree on, hey, here's my convictions, here's our principles, this is what we're really, really good at. We just got to continue to double down on that. It's the Berkshire Hathaway approach. It's,
Yep.
do the boring things really, really well, but just do them over and over and over again. And you're going to be the best at it. And I think
Yep.
that's something that, we recommit to. I mean, we're, I don't want to toot our own horn here, but, we're known as a very high service organization, and that's intentional. That's because we take everything super seriously. We take positive feedback and negative feedback. We give surveys to every touch point that we have, customers, referrals, and we download all of that. I mean, you could ask our staff, like if we get a negative review ever, like literally within, 2 minutes, like I'm on the horn or sending an email to our local manager, like what happened? Let's take care of this customer. Let's figure out how to make this right. And so it's just continuing to double down on what we do well. And, every year we go into it. I think, after 26 years, I think it'd be really easy to get complacent and just have to fight that. And we have to say, okay, here's where we're at today. How can we make it even better? Like, even if we have a great customer experience, how can I take today and make that even better? And that's something we did this year with our leadership team. And we're looking at every angle and way that we can, whatever your touch point is with Bellevue Healthcare, we want to be the best, absolutely, in a service standpoint. And so I challenge everybody, think about it. Where can we get better? How can we improve? And it's something that you just, I think, have to consistently over time commit to. And if you don't, then some of those other things creep in, and we risk, maybe not being in the best in an area that we should be.
Yeah, I think
For
that
sure.
that's a solid piece of advice is the customer feedback. And I do myself, I do case study calls and use case calls with current clients on Eco just to understand, why they switch, what do they like, what was going on before that they were looking to solve a pain point that they had. And that's where you get the best bits of gold, is to really truly understand your customers on such a different wavelength. And that's the stuff that can really drive your marketing, your strategy, and just kind of fix everything along the way. And looking from your perspective, you obviously you oversee, large teams over multiple states. How do you kind of like stay connected to what's happening on the ground, as one person with a very large team?
Yeah, I think part of it's because of our makeup and our structure. We talked a little bit about, our team and our tenure, but I mean, really within our leadership team, within our executive team, we have nobody that's been here less than 20 years. And within our like regional and departmental leadership, I mean, probably 15 plus. And so we have a ton of tenure. And so I think really my job is to stay out of the way. I want our team knows Bellevue Healthcare. They know what we do. They know what we're supposed to do. My job is really to support them. And so, how I stay connected, I still visit every location we have at least once a year. I ride along with our ATPs at least once a year. I have, conversations and regular meetings with all of our department heads, on a weekly basis. And so, and I look at probably too obsessively, but I look at every single review that we have, good, bad, or ugly, whether we solicited it or not, if it just came in through Google or Yelp or whatever. And so I think that gives me a really, really good pulse on what we're doing. And, again, our team is great, and they don't need me to do anything other than just give them the tools they need to go do their job. And so I try to stay out of the way, again, unless we get a negative review, and then I will overstep in that. So.
I think that goes a long way with people. Just, someone at the top being willing to, pick up the phone and, solve problems themselves. It goes a long way with people. Just kind of changing gears, looking ahead, and this is a big question, but overall, where do you think the DME industry is headed over the next 5 to 10 years? There's a lot of opinions on this. There's some potential headwinds. Just curious about your take, Joel.
We're a needed function of healthcare to be in a sustainable place. I mean, we see where costs are going, not just our hard costs, but just our general healthcare spectrum, and there's got to be change. But I always come back to the fact that we're still the best value of being able to keep people in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I do think that there's going to be a lot of changes in how that happens. There's a lot of different models coming out. There's a lot of different payer complexities coming out that, may provide challenges, but the way that we've seen it is every time there's been challenges, there's been a ton of opportunity in that. And so really, I think if we stay focused on what we do really well, do it really well, the opportunity is going to be there. I do think that we will see, we saw, a lot of disruption with competitive bid. We've seen disruption off and on with some of the consolidation that happened, over the last 10 years. That stuff's going to continue to change and evolve and happen. I still see such a big need for what it is that we do and what it is that we provide, that for the companies that are really, really good at it, there's going to be a place and there's going to be opportunities there for sure. What do you guys see? Cause I don't know that we're really focused on what we're doing, but I don't know that things are going to drastically change in terms of how people are getting the equipment and receiving the equipment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the general I would say a lot, at least the people we speak to are very, they understand there's headwinds for sure, but the DME industry is very resilient. And plus there's a lot of new technology to help improve automations and run, a tighter operation. But I would say at least the folks that we encounter are kind of all in the camp that there's definitely opportunity, going forward. And, it's just about execution. I would say is kind of obviously there's a competitive bid and there's some tightening from, the government side of things. But I would say that's the general consensus is there's still a lot of opportunity, even with some potential headwinds, just like there's always been. And obviously there's a aging population that isn't slowing down. And I guess that. Oh, go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say. I mean, there's only so much that that you're able to control, right? At the end of the day, like if there's different policy changes, things like that, that's out of your control. But what you can't control a lot of the time is like how you can optimize for technology or automate different things that maybe would have been a manual process before. And I think that's like a common thread that we're hearing on a lot of these podcasts is how are people going to utilize these technologies to put themselves in a better position, to lower their costs, to have better throughput. And I guess that kind of would lead me to, I guess, my final question for you before we go into the rapid fires is, where do you think like AI and automation is going to have meaningful change in DME from your perspective?
I think we will see. I don't know that we're there yet. I think, and part of it is because of the fragmentation. Again, I was just talking to somebody about this, and I wake up every morning and I probably have 3 or 4 emails from a new AI company, that's like, hey, we can do this or we can do this, which, quite frankly, they can, and there's probably a value add there. But again, going back to, staying focused, I think it would be really easy to add, all this, all these AI pieces, and maybe one can do this and one can do that and one can do that. But really, from an operational standpoint, you can't do that. And so I think for us, it's been, pick partners that are good partners, that are willing to have open dialogue, that are also willing to, engage with what's next and stay up with technology, knowing that we don't necessarily have to be at the cutting edge, at the cutting edge of technology, nor do I think should we be. But, how do we make some of those changes that do provide efficiencies? A great example is, we have an AI partner that's, not that long ago, we were doing it all manually, and then it was more of like an OCR, outsourced. But now, like, all of our faxes are just going through the AI partner, and it's inputting it into our system for us. So once our staff gets it, they actually have good information, as opposed to them spending their time and energy reading a 30-page fax or email, trying to decipher what we need to do with it next. So I think that's the biggest thing that's changed. I think there's a lot of changes coming to the revenue cycle side, which we don't necessarily need to get into, but I do think that's probably one of the biggest areas that we're going to see a lot of change and disruption in here, probably over the next couple of years, maybe closer to 5. But I do think that process is definitely going to change with AI.
Totally. Yeah, well, thanks for answering all that. And now we're going to kind of move into our rapid fire round. It's kind of a this or that quick session that we usually do at the end of all the podcasts. So if you're ready, we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Golf or fishing?
Oh, gosh. I actually really like both. I would say golf, because I golf a whole lot more than I fish.
Boom. Seahawks or Mariners?
Man, come on. This is like, who do you love more, your mom or your dad? Seahawks.
Early mornings or late nights?
Early mornings.
Road trip or fly?
Road trip for sure.
Favorite city in the Northwest?
Bend, Oregon.
Most used app on your iPhone or phone?
Well, we're on Google Enterprise, so that would be my Gmail, chat, Google Docs. Yeah,
there you go.
Sure.
Sneakers or hiking boots?
I love hiking, but sneakers.
All right, last one. What's the most dad thing about you?
Most dad thing?
Yeah.
Man, the fact that every evening I'm basically an Uber driver for my kids' events. I'm going to some event or sporting and academic, whatever it is. So that's what I do in my off hours these days.
That's great. Well, Joel, thanks so much for joining us today. It's a lot of fun. If anyone wants to reach out to you or find out more information about what you do or your company, what's the best way for someone to contact you?
Oh, anyway, on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. But my email is jgallion@bellevuehealthcare.com. So shoot me an email.
You're going to get 5 more new AI product emails tomorrow.
Yeah, I know.
Just goes live.
You're gonna be real careful with that. Luckily, my AI inbox filters all those out. So.
Nice. Well, Joel, this was awesome, man. Can't thank you enough. I think our listeners will really enjoy the insights from the man himself. And thank you again.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Take care.